The planet of Orndath was a breathtaking cosmic oddity, a world where the sky shimmered in hues of molten gold and deep cerulean, where gravity played whimsical tricks, and where the native creatures had more legs than should be considered reasonable. It was a paradise of bioluminescent fungi, floating isles, and rivers that occasionally decided to flow upwards just to keep things interesting. On one such floating landmass, nestled between two gravity-defying waterfalls, Zinex the Vel fox sat. In a miserable heap, he was small, soft, and by all accounts utterly useless to his kind. His fur, supposed to be bristling with defensive spines, was at best fluffier than a malfunctioning pillow. His teeth, meant for tearing into flesh, were barely capable of chewing through Orndathian fruit. And worst of all, his temperament was less ferocious apex predator and more startled library assistant. This was why he had been abandoned. The Vel foxes of the Zenith Claw Dominion were ruthless, cunning, and unrelentingly violent. Zinex, meanwhile, was neither cunning nor violent. He was, however, exceedingly good at solving puzzles, disassembling food storage locks, and feeling bad about everything. In the Zenith Claw's strict doctrine, intelligence was tolerated only if it came with sufficient murder potential. Zinex lacked that essential component, so he was left in the wild to either adapt or perish. He had, instead, developed a third option: sulk. His sulking session, however, was rudely interrupted when an alien, a gangly, bipedal, big-eyed menace, plopped down next to him and began munching on a fruit as though she had every right to exist in his personal misery space. "You're not very scary," she noted between bites. Zinex blinked at her. This was, statistically speaking, the worst possible reaction a Vel fox could have to a threat. It did not involve lunging, biting, or even a mild display of dominance. Instead, he just stared at her, ears twitching, brain slowly buffering like a bad data stream. The alien, who identified herself as Illa Sareen, did not leave. Instead, she continued existing in his space, like some kind of benign infestation. Illa was an intern at the Orndathian Zenobio Institute, an organization dedicated to studying alien life forms, cataloging their behavior, and occasionally making groundbreaking discoveries, usually by accident. She had spotted Zinex earlier in the day, attempting to outsmart a particularly stubborn fruit that refused to be peeled. "You're too smart to be out here alone," she said, tossing him a small fruit. Zinex caught it, peeled it in 3 precise bites, and then immediately regretted accepting the offering. This was clearly a trap, a psychological ambush designed to lure him into some kind of bizarre human scheme. But Illa kept coming back. She studied him, fed him, and to his horror talked to him, a lot. And despite his best efforts, he started responding, not verbally, he was not that kind of creature, but through small gestures, movements, and eventually small puzzles she left. For him, he solved them all, instantly. Every day they grew harder, every day he cracked them effortlessly, and every day he could feel something foreign worming its way into his mind. Hope. Unfortunately, hope was a dangerous thing, especially in a galaxy that prized aggression over intellect. One day, after successfully completing a puzzle involving rotating cylinders, a coded sequence, and a minor electrical current, he found himself the subject of a heated debate. "You don't understand," Illa was saying to a group of skeptical researchers. "At the Zenobio Institute, he's not just smart, he's solving problems with logic, strategy, and a level of intelligence that suggests self-awareness." Dr. Reiner, an older scientist who still had the patience to humor interns, squinted at Zinex. "You're saying this little fluffball is sentient?" Zinex, seated politely in the middle of the conference table, chittered indignantly. He had absolutely no idea what sentient meant, but it sounded important, and he was quite certain he deserved it. Dr. Valen Jex, however, scoffed. "It's an animal, a particularly clever one, but an animal nonetheless. You're anthropomorphizing. Zinex, with great deliberation, reached out with a paw and knocked over Jex's cup of expensive synth coffee. It was a calculated move, scientifically designed for maximum irritation. Jex scowled. That doesn't prove anything. Illa grinned. Maybe not, but what if I told you I've been testing him against the baseline intelligence of some of the smartest species in the galaxy, and he's outperforming them? A silence fell over the room. That was when the real trouble started, because once the Galactic Scientific Collective caught wind of an abandoned predator outclassing some of the finest minds in the known universe, things escalated fast. Within days, Zinex found himself at the center of an interstellar controversy. Was he merely an anomaly? A freak of nature? Or was he something more, a sign that intelligence in the universe was far more diverse and unpredictable than anyone had imagined? The answer would have to wait. Because at that moment, the Zenith Claw Dominion, the very civilization that had discarded him, was now suddenly very interested in taking him back, and the reasons were anything but benevolent. Zinex had never been the center of attention before. In fact, he had spent most of his life actively avoiding it. But now, as he sat in a reinforced examination chamber inside the Orndathian Zenobio Institute, surrounded by researchers, holographic data displays, and no fewer than 17 different scanning devices pointed directly at him, he had no choice but to face reality. He was famous, infamous even, a galactic anomaly, a Vel fox who didn't just snarl and hunt, but solved complex logic puzzles, decrypted mathematical patterns, and, in one memorable instance, successfully reprogrammed an automatic food dispenser to give him extra portions. This last act had both impressed and terrified the scientists. Ilar paced nearby, practically vibrating with excitement. "They're sending a delegation," she told him. "The Galactic Scientific Collective has officially classified you as a high-potential sentient entity. They want to study you, Zinex. This is huge." Zinex stared at her. It did not sound huge. It sounded like the beginning of an elaborate and highly inconvenient ordeal. Dr. Reiner, who had become one of Zinex's reluctant admirers, tapped at his data pad. "If the collective accepts him, he'll be invited to compete in the Galactic Intelligence Summit," Illa gasped. "The summit? The one where the best minds in the universe compete in cognitive, strategic, and problem-solving challenges?" Reiner nodded. "It's where artificial intelligences and organic geniuses compete for the title of greatest mind in the galaxy. If Zinex places, it would completely rewrite the way we define intelligence." Zinex was quite sure he did not want anything rewritten, least of all his peaceful, low-profile existence. He tried to express this by dramatically flopping onto his side and covering his face with his tail. Unfortunately, his opinion was categorically ignored. The news of his impending participation in the summit spread quickly. Some scientists were fascinated, others were skeptical. But no one was more displeased than Dr. Valen Jex. "This is an embarrassment to scientific rigor," Jex muttered darkly, staring at the latest cognitive test results, which Zinex had passed with flying colors. "We are wasting resources on a glorified space raccoon," Illa bristled. "He's not a raccoon," Jex threw up his hands. "Fine, space ferret," Reiner sighed. "Valen, the data doesn't lie. Zinex is beating some of the brightest organic species, and he's doing it faster than most AI models." Jex sneered, "and yet he still eats his own tail when startled." Zinex, who had absolutely done this once, and only once, let out an indignant chitter. It was at that moment that everything went horribly, spectacularly wrong. The Institute's warning sirens blared. The lights dimmed. Emergency lockdown protocols kicked in, slamming reinforced blast doors shut. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Unidentified warships have entered Orndathian orbit. They are broadcasting a priority transmission to the Zenobio Institute. Illa turned to the nearest console, hands flying over the controls. A holographic transmission flickered to life. The face of a Vel fox filled the screen. But unlike Zynex, this one was massive, its fur bristling with metallic implants, its fangs gleaming with predatory menace. "I am Commander Vorthak of the Zenith." "Claw Dominion," the creature snarled. "We are here for the anomaly." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Illa, being Illa, immediately decided that diplomacy was an excellent idea. "He has a name, you know," she said, crossing her arms. "Commander." Vorthak did not appear interested in the finer details of proper naming conventions. "He is one of ours. The Dominion does not tolerate weakness, but it also does not ignore potential. We have seen the reports. The anomaly, Zynex, belongs to us." Zynex would have liked to formally object to this statement. Unfortunately, he was too busy backing away from the screen and hiding behind a pile of research papers. Illa stepped forward. "You abandoned him." Vorthak bared his teeth. "That was an error in judgment," Jex muttered under his breath. "It was the most correct judgment they ever made." Illa shot him a glare before turning back to the transmission. "He's not a possession. He's not a soldier. He's not some experiment for your Dominion to reclaim whenever you feel like it." Vorthak growled. "The summit is a battleground of intelligence. If the anomaly wins, the Dominion claims his victory. If he loses, he is no longer of value." Reiner's expression darkened. "You're saying you'll take him whether he wants to go or not?" "That is correct." Zynex very much did not like that answer. Illa turned to the researchers, her voice urgent. "We need to get him off planet." "Now," Jex scoffed. "Oh, sure, let's just smuggle an intergalactic fugitive out of a locked-down scientific facility, surrounded by a war fleet. No problem. Do you want to make it even more difficult? Maybe we should strap a blinking sign to his back that says, 'Steal me.'" Illa ignored him. "Reiner, do we have an extraction route?" Reiner was already typing furiously. "There's a back channel leading to the research shuttle bay, but it's only a matter of time before the Dominion starts landing troops. Then, we need a distraction." Illa looked at Zynex. Zynex looked back at her, and suddenly she grinned. "You're going to steal a spaceship." Zynex let out a high-pitched chirp of alarm. This was, statistically speaking, a terrible plan, and yet 30 minutes later he found himself shoved into the cockpit of an experimental Zenobio research vessel, his paws gripping the controls, while the entire institute erupted into chaos around him. Illa, crouched beside him, flipped a series of switches. "All right, Zynex, you're the smartest creature in the galaxy, right?" Zynex let out a warbled whine. "Good, then figure out how to fly this thing." The docking bay doors were beginning to open. Alarms blared. In the distance, Dominion ships were descending, their weapons glowing ominously. Zynex gulped, and then he did what he did best. He solved the problem. With a rapid series of taps and swipes, he hacked into the ship's neural interface. The engines roared to life, and just as the first Dominion shock troopers burst into the hangar, Zynex and Illa blasted out of the facility, spiraling wildly into the chaotic Orndathian sky. As the research ship rocketed toward deep space, Illa let out an exhilarated laugh. "See, you're a natural," Zynex chittered in response. In his opinion, they were all doomed. The stolen research vessel hurtled through space in a zigzag trajectory that could generously be described as chaotically, innovative and less generously described as a disaster in progress. Inside the cockpit, Illa clung to the edge of her seat, her face twisted in a mixture of exhilaration and mild regret. "Zynex, buddy, we need to have a conversation about your piloting skills." Zynex hunched over the controls like an anxious gremlin, let out a high-pitched, chittering whine. "This is not my fault," was what it likely translated to. Behind them, The Zenith Claw Dominion's warships swarmed like a pack of particularly determined space vultures. Their weapons fired in bursts of crimson energy, lighting up the darkness of space with spectacular explosions, most of which, thankfully, missed mostly. The ship lurched as a plasma blast grazed their starboard wing, sending a shower of sparks across the console. Zinex let out a deeply distressed series of chirps and immediately slapped a control panel with both paws. Unfortunately, this only succeeded in turning on the windshield wipers. "I appreciate the dedication to visibility," Illa said, flipping switches in a desperate attempt to take over the navigation, but maybe focus on not dying. Zinex let out an offended trill and, with a sudden flash of inspiration, reared up on his hind legs. His fluffy tail twitched as he hacked into the ship's emergency thrusters. The stolen vessel gave an almighty lurch, spiraling unpredictably, in a way that no sentient species in their right mind would attempt. The Dominion ships, not anticipating their target to execute an emergency barrel roll at escape velocity, overcorrected. Two of them clipped each other, spinning off into empty space. "Ha!" Illa whooped. "Nice work, genius." Zinex was too busy hyperventilating into his tail to celebrate. Unfortunately, their problems were far from over. The warships adjusted, course, still hot on their tail. Even with his puzzle-solving brain running at maximum capacity, Zinex knew they couldn't keep evading forever. And then, as if the universe itself was determined to make things worse, the ship's console flashed. Red, warning, warp drive damaged, long-distance jump unavailable. Illa's triumphant grin faltered. Well, that's not ideal. Zinex emitted a sound that could best be described as the electronic equivalent of a sad trombone. All right, Illa muttered, yanking up the star maps. "We need somewhere to hide." Behind them, the Dominion ships closed in. Ahead, a single celestial body lay within reach, an enormous, sprawling space station orbiting a gas giant. Illa's eyes widened. The Hyperion Bazaar. Zinex tilted his head in question. "It's a neutral zone, a massive trade station where every species in the galaxy gathers. The Dominion won't be able to openly attack us there without breaking about 700 interstellar laws." Zinex made an immediate executive decision and rerouted their course. The battered research vessel shot toward the enormous station, its neon-lit docks growing larger with every second. The bazaar was a labyrinthine megastructure, home to countless factions, traders, and smugglers. It was a place where fortunes were made and lost, where entire civilizations conducted business under a strict truce enforced by an extremely well-armed and deeply irritable security force. The docking authorities hailed them the moment they entered. "Range, unregistered vessel, state your purpose." Illa jammed her finger against the comm. Hello, we are very normal traders, totally non-suspicious traders, requesting emergency docking because we are absolutely not being chased by an empire of furious murder foxes." There was a pause. "Right, that'll be a 500 credit docking fee." Illa groaned and yanked a random credit chit from her pocket. "Fine, just let us in before we get vaporized." A moment later, the docking bay force fields flickered open. Their ship wobbled inside, landing with all the grace of a collapsing building. Zinex slumped over the console, exhausted. Illa unstrapped herself. "Okay, we blend in, find a way to repair the ship, and get to the Galactic Intelligence Summit before the Dominion finds us. Easy." Zinex gave her an extremely dubious look. The moment they stepped onto the station, Zinex realized that blending in was going to be a problem. For one, Illa was human. While not the rarest species in the galaxy, humans tended to stand out, mostly because they had the baffling tendency to survive things they absolutely shouldn't. This made them both fascinating and deeply concerning to other civilizations. And then there was Zinex. The Hyperion Bazaar had seen many things, but a Vel fox wearing a makeshift harness because Illa insisted he needed pockets, while riding on a human shoulder like an anxious parrot was a new one. Illa adjusted her grip on him as they maneuvered through the crowded market. Okay, let's keep a low profile. They passed a group of heavily armed insectoid traders, a bipedal slug selling counterfeit star maps, and a sentient pile of sentient rocks arguing about real estate prices. Zinex immediately did not keep a low profile. The sheer overwhelming stimuli, the smells, the sounds, the flashing neon signs advertising everything from exotic cuisine to morally questionable cybernetics, was too much. His brain short-circuited. He bolted. Zinex! Illa shrieked as he launched himself off her shoulder and disappeared into the crowd. She pushed through a herd of three-eyed bovine merchants, dodged an enthusiastic salesman trying to sell her a suspiciously organic-looking wristwatch, and nearly tripped over a tiny, furious lizard wearing a very expensive-looking cape. Zinex, meanwhile, had discovered something wonderful, a snack vendor. He was already halfway through his third stolen snack, some kind of glowing, gelatinous orb, when he realized he had made a tactical error. The owner of the stand, a massive, amphibious alien, with 4 arms and an apron that read, "Kiss the chef, or else," loomed over him. Zinex swallowed. The vendor growled. "You gonna pay for that, fuzzball?" Zinex considered his options. Then, very slowly, he reached into his harness pocket and pulled out exactly 1 button and a lint-covered gummy worm. The vendor did not seem impressed. Just as Zinex was about to be turned into soup stock, Illa came skidding into view. "Hey," she gasped, hands on her knees. "There you are. Sorry, sir. This is my emotional support fox." The vendor narrowed his eyes. "Your thieving emotional support fox. I can pay." Illa pulled out her last credit chit. The vendor inspected it, then grunted, "Fine, but keep him under control." Zinex chirped happily, stuffing another glowing orb into his mouth. Illa groaned, "You're killing me, buddy." But before she could drag him away, a shadow loomed behind them, a figure in dark, imposing armor. Illa turned. Her stomach dropped. "Commander." Vorthak stood there, flanked by 2 armored enforcers. The Dominion had found them. "You can run, little anomaly," Vorthak growled. "But you cannot hide forever." Zinex froze, ears pinned back. Illa's mind raced. They were trapped, and if they didn't get out of this fast, the Dominion would take Zinex back, and that was not an option. Zinex had precisely 3 thoughts in rapid succession. 1. He should not have eaten that last glowing snack orb. 2. Vorthak was way too close and way too menacing for comfort. 3. He was about to become an unwilling participant in what humans called a very bad time. Illa, standing beside him, had come to similar conclusions, though with significantly more swearing. Vorthak loomed over them, his armor gleaming under the neon lights of the Hyperion Bazaar. His enforcers, massive clawed brutes in matching black exosuits, flanked him on either side, their glowing visors pulsing ominously. The crowd around them shifted uneasily, sensing the tension. "I commend your resourcefulness, little anomaly," Vorthak growled, his voice like crushed gravel. "But the game is over." Illa grabbed Zinex by the harness strap, slowly backing away. "Yeah, see, the thing is, I don't actually remember agreeing to play this game, so we're gonna have to pass on the whole kidnapping and probable genetic experimentation thing." Vorthak's eyes narrowed. "You misunderstand. This is not an offer." One of his enforcers stepped forward, reaching for Zinex. Zinex, who had spent the last several weeks learning entirely too much about galactic politics, immediately deployed. The most effective strategy known to any intelligent species under threat. He bit the enforcer's hand. The enforcer howled, shaking his arm wildly. "He bit me! He bit me!" Zinex held on like his life depended on it, because it absolutely did. The crowd, already entertained by the prospect of an altercation, exploded into laughter. Apparently, watching an elite Dominion enforcer flail around in an attempt to dislodge a very determined, very fluffy Vel fox was hilarious. Illa seized the moment. "Run!" she yelled, grabbing Zinek's mid-bite and launching into a sprint. They tore through the bazaar, knocking over crates, startling vendors and dodging at least 3 different types of exotic livestock. Behind them, Vorthak roared in fury, shoving past pedestrians as he gave chase. Zinex, still clutched in Illa's arms, flailed and chittered, pointing frantically toward a neon-lit alleyway. Left, Illa gasped. Zinex chirped urgently. She veered left, diving into a narrow corridor between 2 towering trade halls. The alley was packed with makeshift vendor stalls, tangled power lines and crates stacked in precarious, highly collapsible towers. Zinex, processing the situation faster than any organic creature should, did what he did best. He solved the problem. With a single, well-aimed swipe of his tail, he knocked over a carefully balanced stack of crates behind them. The ensuing avalanche of alien fruits, mechanical parts, and one very startled robotic parrot created an impenetrable blockade. They did not slow down to admire his handiwork. Bursting out of the alley, they found themselves in the heart of the bazaar's transit hub, a sprawling, chaotic nexus of landing pads, transport shuttles, and one very familiar stolen research vessel. Illa skidded to a stop, panting. "How is our ship still here? I thought they impounded it." Zinex, despite being a non-verbal species, gave her a look that clearly said, "Does it matter?" Unfortunately, it did matter, because standing next to the ship, looking extremely smug, was Dr. Valen Jex. Illa groaned. "Oh, come on!" Jex folded his arms. "You really think I wouldn't keep tabs on you? You stole a government vessel, Illa. It's been flagged across every major outpost in the sector. I was just waiting for you to come crawling back." Behind them, the sounds of enraged Dominion warriors shoving their way through the crowd grew louder. Illa threw her hands up. "Jex, I swear, if you don't let us on that ship right now, I will personally submit a 20-page complaint to the Scientific Ethics Board about how you tried to sabotage a sentient being's right to compete in the summit." Jex's smug expression wavered. Zinex, sensing weakness, made the most pitiful, heart-wrenching chirping noise in existence. Jex groaned, rubbing his temples. Fine. Get on the stupid ship before I change my mind." They scrambled aboard. Behind them, Vorthak and his enforcers exploded onto the landing pad. "Stop them!" The ship's engines roared to life. Vorthak lunged. Illa slammed the hatch shut. The stolen research vessel blasted off, escaping into the neon-lit abyss of hyperspace just as Vorthak's claws scraped against the hull. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Illa burst into hysterical laughter, collapsing into the co-pilot seat. Zinex, slumped in exhaustion, gave a weak, triumphant chirp. Jex, looking like he deeply regretted all of his life choices, muttered, "I can't believe I just committed intergalactic treason for a fox." The Galactic Intelligence Summit was the single most prestigious event in the known universe. It was attended by the brightest organic and artificial minds from every corner of the galaxy. Advanced AI, bioengineered geniuses, and entire civilizations' worth of scholars gathered to test their intellect against one another in the ultimate battle of wits. And standing at the center of it all, looking extremely fluffy and very stressed, was Zinex. Illa knelt beside him. "Okay, deep breaths, buddy, you've got this." Zinex, who had just been informed that he would be competing against an actual hyper-advanced sentient supercomputer, did not feel like he had this. Dr. Reiner, appearing on the holofeed, gave them a reassuring nod. "Zinex, no matter what happens, you've already changed the galaxy. This is just the final step." Illa grinned. "Yeah, and if we lose, we just commit more treason and steal another ship." Jex groaned. "Please stop saying that." The competition began. It was grueling. It was unbelievably difficult, but Zinex excelled. He solved logic puzzles faster than the most advanced AI. He cracked linguistic codes that had stumped scholars for centuries. He outwitted a sentient quantum probability matrix. And in the final, most critical challenge, a real-time strategic simulation against the greatest tactical minds in the galaxy, he did something no one expected. He didn't outthink the competition. He outmaneuvered them, because while everyone else played by the rules, Zynex, born from the brutal cunning of the Zenith Claw Dominion, raised by the unpredictability of human nonsense, cheated in the most spectacular way possible, and won. Chadi. Crowd erupted. The judges, after a long and heated debate, declared him the champion. The Dominion, furious, attempted to contest the results, but the Galactic Scientific Collective, now very publicly invested in Zynex's victory, declared him a recognized, sentient entity. With full autonomy, Zynex was free. Illa hugged him tight. "You did it, buddy!" Zynex, his tail wagging wildly, let out the happiest chirp in the history of the universe. And somewhere, deep in the stars, Commander Vorthak let out a long sigh of pure existential regret.